This is season 3 of The Sweater with Kathleen Dames. I'm your host, Kathleen Dames, and over the course of our 12-week season, we will knit basic cable together. An awesome worsted weight cabled pullover. Hello, my friends, and welcome to season 3, episode 9. Oh my goodness. We are to the yoke. This is actually one of my favorite parts of sweater knitting because it's when everything comes together. We do some shaping and we have a sweater. There's a lot going on in the yoke. You're going to be keeping track of where you are with your cables, where you are with your decreases, bringing it all in, shaping it onto the shoulders. Now, as I said last week, the raglan yoke is one of the more straightforward yokes in terms of shaping. I think it's a great, it does a decent job of fitting most figures. So if you feel like you're ready for something a little different, if you've knit Pearly Pullover and the Solstice Cardi, and you're ready for a different kind of shoulder shaping, a different way of doing the yoke, I highly recommend one of my all-time favorite books. This is Knitting Workshop by Elizabeth Zimmerman. It's put out by Schoolhouse Press. You can find it in all the usual places, but definitely check it out at Schoolhouse Press because I love supporting them. They are a great company. There are, I can't remember if it's 7, I think it's 7 different types of yoke shaping that you can do, all, as I mentioned last week, beginning with the tubes of the body and the sleeves. So, you could do a raglan, which we've done. You could do a round yoke, something like my block pulley. You could do a saddle shoulder sweater, which I did in the Bannock cardigan. And I'm going to be doing that for basic cable, and that's going to be bringing that cable up onto the shoulder like an epaulette. You do some different shaping here, changing the direction of the shaping to decrease away the sleeve or the body stitches, and that's a really nice one. There's the hybrid sweater, which Elizabeth says, the hybrid is very like the saddle shoulder, except the armhole seams slant rather like a raglan, and the saddles are wider. So if you've got a wider cable, you may want to consider that. The hybrid is a similar thing with the shaping here. It also involves a back saddle that I used for an errand for Frederick, which is one of my all-time favorite and most popular patterns, and it allows that cable that's on the front and the back, the cable continues up the back panel, and that's great. Shirt yoke is kind of like a men's or woman's dress shirt where you'd have a smaller piece of fabric across the back. That can be very interesting. And set-in sleeve, I did that with my first Knitty pattern, Turn of the Glass, and it really looks like a more commercial style of sweater with that set-in sleeve and a sleeve cap, but without having to do all the seaming that's often required in set-in sleeve patterns, which are often knit in pieces. And then, of course, there's the Nalgar, which is a lot of fun. Nalgar is, of course, the opposite of raglan, and it involves increasing here, and it causes the sweater sleeve to be created. So you don't create the sleeves first on that one. That's a really interesting construction. And it uses, instead of decreases here for the raglan, it uses these increases to form the sort of squared off shoulder. So it's a very interesting technique. But definitely check out Knitting Workshop. I highly recommend it, or Knitting Around, or Knitting Without Tears. I think Knitting Without Tears is another one that has all of the yoke shapings in it. And they're just great ways to do seamless yokes in a variety of styles. We are focusing on the raglan today, and for a raglan, you decrease at 4 points around the body, 2 stitches decreased at each of those points, and it makes this sort of diagonal. And of course, because knitting is, stitches are wider than they are tall. Is that right? 4 stitches, 6 rows. Yes, you need more rows to equal a number of stitches. So we don't end up with a 45-degree angle is where I was trying to go with that. If your stitches were square, the raglan would create a sharp 45-degree line. This is more like 30-degree angle, and it works for a lot of body types. So, and it's also easy to remember. With some of the other shoulder shapings, yoke shapings, you are doing different things at different parts. Sometimes you're decreasing away sleeve stitches, sometimes you're decreasing away body stitches, and you change the direction of things depending on where you are in the yoke. With a raglan, you are decreasing every other round. It's really easy to remember. So that can be very helpful if you are new to sweater knitting, because we don't want it to be hard. It's not supposed to be intimidating. It's supposed to be fun, but challenging. The yoke is definitely sort of the most challenging part. And one of the reasons I like to do work bottom up is that sometimes the yoke is where you have the most challenge fitting. And if your yoke fits your body, I mean, if your yoke fits your shoulders, the rest of it is gravy. You know, a good fitting sweater up here, you can go big on the bottom if you want. You can go fitted, but if it doesn't fit up here, that makes it tough. And then it just doesn't look like it fits as a sweater. Everything else can be style if the shoulders fit. So if you have a problem, if you finish your yoke and you decide you just do not like the way it's fitting you, there's much less knitting to rip back and to change. In fact, you may only have to go back part way, and then you may need to decrease more severely in the last few rounds of the raglan shaping. That's a great way to make that change. But if you work top down, I just find that I have a hard time telling if something fits here sufficiently without the rest of the sweater. That is me. A lot of people adore top-down sweaters, so you could reverse engineer this sweater to be worked top-down. It's really easy. Instead of decreasing, you'd be increasing. The raglan lines would look a little different because we're not eating away those stitches and creating those pretty lines. You would have a slightly different look with the increases there. But that's certainly something you could do, and that of course would be knitter's choice. So as I said, I'm doing the premium cable. I'm going to do it saddle shoulder. So I've had to do things a little differently in terms of setting myself up for knitting the yoke. And the main thing I had to do is, instead of putting the markers between the body and sleeve points, I needed to put removable stitch markers. I've got those little Edison bulb shaped pins, and I've put them in the first and last stitches of the front and the back of the sweater, because I'm going to be doing directional decreases that will keep using that stitch and moving it in. But for the basic cable pattern, you have 2 stitches between your decreases. So I have a marker in between those, and it just makes everything really parallel, which is nice. So you will work to 3 stitches before a marker, you will do your decrease, you will knit a stitch, you will slip the marker, knit another stitch, and do your other decrease. And again, remember, we're using those paired decreases. So slip, slip, knit, and knit 2 together. And one great thing, I think I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. One way to think about the decreases is the stitch that your needle goes into first is the stitch that will end up on top on your decrease, and that influences the direction. So slip, slip, knit, your needle went into that decrease, the first stitch first. So that stitch will be on top, and that means it will lean to my left. And then knit 2 together, you put your needle through the second stitch first, correct? Because that's how you knit 2 together. And so that stitch leans to my right, yes? And then for double decreases, double decreases, if you slip 1, knit 2 together, pass, slip, stitch over, that slipped stitch is the first one, and that double decrease will lean one way. Knit 3 together, your stitches will lean the other way because you've gone all the way over to that third stitch. And of course, my favorite double decrease, you may already know, is slip 2, knit 1, pass 2 slip stitches over, and your needle has gone into that middle stitch first, and that's how the middle stitch ends up on top, and you get a nice straight line. So you can do really different things just with changing those decreases. You could decide that you want the decreases to face away from this center 2-stitch raglan line. And or you could decide, you know, I really like that more delicate double decrease. I'm going to do that, and I'm just going to mark this. Then you want to mark the first and last body stitch and decrease along there, and then you're eating away 1 stitch from the sleeve and 1 stitch from the body every time you do a decrease. And so we decrease 8 stitches every time we do our decrease round, and that we do that every other round, and that gives us this nice straight diagonal line. I'm going to be doing something a little different with the premium cable. I'm going to be decreasing away some of the body stitches first, and then I will change direction and be decreasing away some of the sleeve, and then I'm going to do basically a little saddle, and I'm going to be doing short rows, and that will connect the front and the back of the body and leave that cable going up there. So I'm excited to do that because that's a lot of fun, and it's short rows that instead of wrapping and turning, we're doing a decrease here to connect the saddle and the body fabric every time. And so that's a slightly different way, but it is still a short row because we're not going the whole way around. So that's going to be the basics of doing our raglan. And I did a little description for you of the saddle shoulder, but the raglan is what we are concerned with here. The other thing to remember on this, if you're doing this cable, which you are, is that you will get to a point where you won't have enough stitches to work a cable crossing. It's just a fact of life with this kind of shaping. It's okay. When you get there, just keep those stitches in pattern, by which I mean keep them in stockinette, and you'll just get this, you'll get one little one where you just probably can't cross it. And that's okay. And if you do it in parallel, both ends, you know, if you do it with conviction, it's not an error, it's a feature. Well, it's not a big deal. If you tried to cross it, you would be taking away stitches from your decrease line. You don't want to do that. So, so just forge ahead and don't fret about that. So I think that's really everything there is to know about yoke shaping. We're continuing to work in the round. If you want to raise the back of the neck as you get near the top of your yoke, if you feel like I want a higher back of the neck, which is totally fine, then you'll want to do some short rows. And for that, I would work over a little bit on the front, and then so you'd stop working in the round and you'd start working back and forth, and you'd want to sort of set aside a center section of stitches that you want to stay in this position, and then you'd start working back and forth and building up some more rows on the back of the neck, and you would just continue doing the raglan shaping for your yoke, and you'd be purling back. But of course, in the cables, you'd need to keep track of you know, you'd knit the knits and you'd knit the purls and purl the knits on the way back on your wrong side rows. So that's the only thing to keep in mind. And if you have been doing the 7-row cable crossing that I ended up doing here in basic cable, you will need to be very conscious of when you need to do a cable crossing row on the wrong side potentially. So just bear that in mind when you're going that way. You could also stop the cables and do the short rows in garter stitch, and so you'd have sort of a higher collar, and that is a great way to do it too. So I think that covers the basics of your yoke shaping. If you have any questions, of course, ask, forums, YouTube comments, email, tweet me, comment on an Instagram post. I am in all the places. So, so there are definitely, you will not run out of places to ask me a question. And I will answer you as quickly as I can, and so you can keep moving on your sweater. So, okay, so Jane and I thought, as a quick bonus, that we would show you some of the different yoke styles in sweaters that I've knit. As you know, basic cable and the pearly pullover, which I'm wearing, are raglans, and they have those simple angled yokes. All right, Jane, you ready? Oh, Jane is now going to wear, this is Southerton. And Southerton is a round yoke, but it doesn't look like most round yokes. When you think of a round yoke, you probably think of like a Fair Isle. It has that pretty color work in the yoke. But there are other ways to do a round yoke. Okay, and Jane is wearing Southerton. And for round yokes, you do decreases at stepped intervals, getting rid of about 1/3 of the stitches each time. And so in Southerton, those decreases are very hidden into the purl fabric, which is a little sneaky, but we've got a decrease round about halfway up, and then a quarter, and then a quarter again. And that brings everything very smoothly and subtly in. So you don't really notice the shaping on a round yoke too much, especially here in Southerton, because you are looking at the twisted stitch panel here at the waist, bringing everything in, and the general flattering twisted stitches all over. Okay, so that was Southerton. Next we have Bannock, which is a saddle shoulder sweater, and as you can see, there's a beautiful cable panel going up. It's actually like an epaulette, so it starts right up here, but it goes up onto the shoulder. Let's get this set there. And this is a jacket type of sweater, but that's not to do with the yoke. That's just to do with the overall construction. But you can see there is shaping here that brings everything in, and then we're doing these short rows here, and this line of stitches, there we go, are the decreases that we do for the saddle, and that brings this panel up onto the shoulder. So that's what I'm going to be doing for premium cable. I'm very excited. And Bannock was originally published in Jane Austen Knits and is now available direct to you from my Ravelry shop. Next we have Turn of the Glass. This was published in Knitty and is a nice jacket sort of cardigan. I wear mine with a pin to close it. I didn't want to fuss it up with buttons and stuff on this wide seed stitch button band. But as you can see, it's a seamless, there we go, seamless set-in sleeve. And it looks more like a commercial sort of sweater that you would buy. And so it's got this shaping here, and then it comes together up here. We do short rows across the back. There we go. And there's a 3-needle bind off here. So it's a nice sturdy seam here, and that sort of commercial style sleeve cap thing going on here, but all done with decreases rather than with stitches that are bound off and then sewn together. And then set in together, I should say, actually. And then last but not least, this is an errand for Frederick. This was also published in Jane Austen Knits in the very first issue. And it is available from my Ravelry shop, and it is one of my favorites. It tells a story with the cables, Celtic flourish in the center, XOXO cable, twin waves, and the ensign's braid, and the ensign's braid goes up from the sleeve onto the yoke. So the hybrid is a little bit like a saddle shoulder, but as I mentioned, it also has this great back saddle that brings the cable up here too. And it's a broader saddle on the shoulder. And again, we shape things here on the sleeve, and then we bring it up onto the shoulder by working short rows and working back and forth on here and nipping off a stitch at either side with these decreases, and that's what connects it all together. So An Errand for Frederick is also available in my Ravelry shop, and it has, I just love it. It tells a story from Persuasion by Jane Austen. So there are a few of the different yoke styles that you could create with your sweater if you're looking for something a little different than just your basic raglan. I hope this has been helpful and informative. Next week, right before Christmas, if you celebrate, we will be talking about finishing. So I'll talk about great bind-off options, the usual sort of weaving in ends. We'll do a Kitchener stitch demonstration, all that good stuff that you need to beautifully finish off your handmade sweater. And So that will be next time. That will be very exciting. And then as we get right up to the end of the year, we'll talk about blocking. And we'll do the sweater dance and stomp all over our sweaters, give everything a bath, and get ready for wearing. So I need to get to work on the yoke of my premium cable. You need to get to work on the yoke of your basic cable. And I hope you're having a happy day and that you're getting a lot of knitting done. Thank you so much for being here, and happy knitting. Mwah! Bye. This is season 3 of The Sweater with Kathleen Dames. Over the course of our 12-week season, we will knit basic cable together. Many thanks to Jen at Spirit Trail Fiberworks, Corinna at Picnic Knits, Tara Swiger and my fellow Starship captains, and you for being part of The Sweater with Kathleen Dames. Don't forget to visit KathleenDames.com/thesweater to sign up for the newsletter. Just not a joiner? Purchase your copy of Basic Cable from my Ravelry shop anytime. Be sure to share your progress on social media with the hashtags BasicCable and KDSweater. Questions? Comments? Visit the Kathleen Dames Design Ravelry forum today. Thanks so much for joining me, and happy knitting!